Hi, I'm Veetika. I'm the senior product designer for the pipeline execution team. And today I'm going to talk about managing my UX capacity. So to be able to deliver maximum values for our work as designers who are working for a complex product, we need to prioritize the items that we work on. We need to switch through a lot of context very regularly and even need to continually, learn from our past mistakes and keep improving as we go on. And planning helps us do just that. Now, during my time here at GitLab, I've tried and tested and even experimented with so many different ways for planning my quarterly and even my milestone work. And today, I think that I'm in a position where I can say that I have a lot better clarity around what I'm doing and how I'm managing my workload. So in today's presentation, I'd mostly be running you through the evolution of my planning process over time. Okay, so where did I begin? So this is the epic that I first started to use. This was around more than a year ago, and it, how it used to work was I started off working uh, I would manually add to a table all the design issues that I plan to work on in a given milestone, and I had to go and look for issues with a certain set of labels on the GitLab project, and make sure that all the items that I'm putting here in the tables, they stay updated at all times. And this was doable until there was a requirement that I work for two groups. So there was a time when I was kind of handling work for both the CI as well as pipeline authoring group. And if luckily I found an issue that also kind of gives a peek into how scary the situation was. So like you can see, there was a huge number of issues that were being worked on, and it was kind of getting very difficult for me to uh, manually keep a track of everything and at the same time keep on updating things. And while these things were happening, there's also kind of a confusion, like when should I be removing issues from this epic and when should I be adding issues to this epic. So I decided after having a conversation with my two PMs and my manager that this was getting too much to handle. So I would rather work with the planning issue for the stage group, because it was also kind of observed that there's a disconnection between my own planning and my team's planning. And it was only a better way to work that I start participating in the stage group planning instead. So making this transition was interesting. Uh, Along with the engineering plan work, we started to have a UX plan work section here in this issue. And what this did was it exposed certain flaws in our process. So continuous integration, which is now pipeline authoring, it's a mature stage group. So we need some critical, we get some critical infra issues on a regular basis, and they are hardly ever planned. So something that we missed before was the number of unplanned issues that make their way into my table within the milestone, something that I have been ignoring before. And since the triaging was mostly done for the engineering efforts and had a little or no room for design maneuver, I had to make sure that I deliver things before the development milestone hits. And usually they were set like in very close proximity, maybe the next milestone on, if I'm lucky, then next to next milestone. So yeah, that was the difficulty I was facing. And I had no ground to put my foot down and say that this is my limit, because I was unable to even calculate my limit in this situation. Now, Hannah, who had very recently transitioned as my manager around that time, she took notice of a few things that I was myself not able to observe around that time. And she helped me navigate through my planning process, asking me many questions along the way. And that was also the quarter, I think, where we were focusing on career growth and development. So I figured that the first thing I need to do was get my priorities in order and set a scope division goal for myself. And that's where I took Pedro's help. And Pedro was very patiently, he took me through his own process, how he prioritizes his commitments. And that's when I came up with this table. So I try to understand what are my key priorities, targeted responsibilities, and then what's my current time of division, and where is it that I want myself to like what is it that I want to achieve, what changes I have to make, and what should be the trajectory, like how should I move towards that. So now I had a clear picture of where I was headed, and I also was aware of the challenges that I had to get through from my previous experiences. So the key challenges that I kind of observed on the way was I should be keeping the system lightweight and easy to communicate. Lightweight because it shouldn't take me a lot of effort to just go in and feed the information. So it should be easy to maintain as well. Then maintain an SSOT because now I was everywhere. Like if I'm taking care of a couple of stage groups, I am probably participating in both the planning issues, and eventually I'm also having to keep another document just to keep a track of all the items that I worked on a milestone because things are so scattered all along. So maybe a better method to maintain an SSOT. And at the same time, I thought that I should also be flexible because there are many different responsibilities that come along the way. It shouldn't be that my structure, my process is so rigid that it just couldn't, it makes it very difficult to make room for any unanticipated work that shows up. And then calculating velocity. So this was taking a hard hit. It was very difficult for me to understand how much is it that I can uh, take up in a milestone, or even like what are the things, when should I start telling no? And that was really important because I was ending up overworking myself. Then apart from all of this, it was also very important for me to align with my PM's process because we have to work in tandem when it comes to a team. So that's when I started working on my plan for Q2 and Q3. And this is like, I just put a very rough structure here, and this was later translated into something better. Like uh, I moved this set of information in a different way to some milestone issues, which I'll get to after some time. Now, when Jackie took over as an interim PM for pipeline execution, she proposed to bring in an old method that she had been using in the release team with Hannah before. And that was to use an epic to track all the activities, all the active design work in the stage group. So we made a shift in the working style here. And instead of assigning milestones for development work first, the issues are now added to this epic first. And once we get the design work done, only then it is moved to, uh, it is assigned any milestone and moved to planning breakdown when it is weighed by the developers. So design is always ahead of development by default with this method. And that's what I really like about it. Now you may ask that what happens to the forward-looking concept? So based on the user inputs that we get and also inputs from marketing, our essays, our TAMs, we keep aside a generous bandwidth for research every milestone. So besides tackling problems in a very reactive way, we also make sure that we are working on some value adding and even value enhancing proposals. And this literally took away from me the responsibility to keep a vigilant eye on the triaged issues and regularly look out for any change that might happen on any of the planned issues, because it was getting just too difficult. There are so many different labels that were used, and even when one label goes away, it gets very tricky if I should be looking at that issue or should I be like removing it from my backlog. But this epic in itself, it was very transient. I mean, it solved a lot of problems for me, yes, but it was in itself very transient because items come here, and the moment the workflow design phase is over, I put the workflow planning breakdown labels on those, and then they go away from this epic. So it made it difficult to track the velocity again and keep a track of capacity and even keep a record of all the milestone work that I've been doing. So let's say if I'm working too fast, then I don't even have an idea about how many issues I'm taking up in a milestone. And for that, Hannah made a really good suggestion that for creating milestone design planning issues. So I pick up items from this epic and I plan to work on in a given milestone and add them to respective milestone issues. Now, at first, it appears like this is too much of work, but this has actually been very like beneficial for me in many ways, and I'll get to it. So I also add works from other stage groups because there are times when I am also supporting different stage groups. For example, in 14.1 and 14.2, I kind of I'm supporting project quality, like the testing team with the project quality dashboard solution validation exercise. So that's also accounted for. And along with that, if I write any blogs or do any kind of illustrations or any side work, all the UX OKR works, they're all accounted for in these milestone issues. Now, um, yeah. So it took me about a couple of months to recalculate my capacity, even while I was working with this process. But this is the closest I have ever been to being successful in this effort. My scope is flexible enough now. And I mean, by flexibility, I mean, I can include work from all different sides to this issue. And I've kind of included many different examples for milestone issue because I started off with like experimenting again, and over time I have been able to realize like what's my capacity and where could I reduce time, what could I take away to make room for something that shows up. For example, like in this milestone, since I have some onboarding buddy duties while onboarding Gina to the testing team. So I reduced my capacity for stage work from 20 to 15. And similarly, this was the research bandwidth was brought down from 15 to 6. So it's easier for me to understand and keep a track of like what becomes less and where can I make compromises. So coming back to the challenges, now, yes, I have an SOT, which is the milestone issues. It has information from all different sites all at one place. And it's very easy for me to communicate with my product manager, with my CI/CD UX design teammates, with my manager, and also with my engineering teammates. So everybody's able to look at what is it that is occupying me in a given milestone, and they understand what's happening there. And it's also very lightweight because what I do is like I have a pretty good idea about how much I can accommodate. So once this is done, like then whatever is being added to this epic, apart from the active issues, I can see that this is what I'll be working on in the next to next milestone because it's in my epic, it is prioritized, so that's where it goes. And then it is totally aligned with my PM's process and it's very smooth. And I'm totally able to keep, like, I have a full control over my capacity in this way. And that's all. There are a couple of reads that I found very interesting online, and I'll be adding these links to the document as well. But yeah, that's it. Questions?
This is awesome, Vitika. Thank you for sharing your process with us. Then I have a read-only item, but if you want a voice, feel free to do that.
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you so much. This was so interesting for me, for us right now. And I've just dropped a link in there to an issue which links to a Google sheet where we've across the team have gathered kind of how we're doing milestone planning at the moment, if we're doing it, and some of the challenges around that. I'd love to talk more about this. So thank you so much for sharing this. This is really interesting.
Great. I'll be happy to have this chat with you sometime.
Awesome. Mine is not a question, it's a shout out. I'm super happy to see like the story, right, that you've put together on this. And I think, I know figuring out UX capacity is hard. And I think especially for us that, well, now everyone is working remotely, but when you come from a non-remote environment and you have to figure out how to collaborate with people, understand the product, understand your capacity, how you work, it's hard. Yeah. And I've been through that myself. And I think you mentioned a lot of key elements, to figuring out that capacity. It's like being more strategic when collaborating with your team, being part of the planning process, planning issue. I think, I'm not sure how things are going on with other teams, but sometimes you see that, yeah, designers are not included in the workload for what the release is going to look like. That should be the default, right? And recording that, keeping the receipt for what the UX capacity and the effort is. I think it also helps us to say no when we are doing, right? Not a lot, not too much, but when we are at capacity. And I have very strong opinions about this topic. I linked here a comment in a thread that I had, a conversation I had with Nick Post about balancing designer responsibilities in more senior roles. And in my experience, I think it gets easier when your counterparts are also thinking, working strategically. And I see that, for example, a lot in what Pedro does and how he organizes his work, his priorities that you mentioned. Anyway, I have a lot of opinions, but thank you for sharing, Vitika. That was awesome to see. Yeah.
Thanks, Hannah.
Nadia, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Vitika. This is super interesting, and I understand the struggle. I've gone through a very similar process as well, and also landed on using the planning issues for this. Though I don't really use our weighting scale, so I was wondering, how do you ensure you accurately assess the issue weight, and do you often find yourself having to move issues back to problem validation, or just not engage in like active design because there's so many open questions? Or like, what's your process for actually getting those issues weighted?
Right. So this also touches upon a very recent problem we faced in pipeline execution, that there were some items which were so so complex that the moment they got into workflow design phase, we started to uncover problems that we had no idea about. And like it went into a rabbit hole of discussion again. So we made a change to the handbook. I'm not able to find it right away, but I will definitely share the link on this document. And that change says that just like we create a spike issue in the development, like when there's a development triage happening for having discussions which were not anticipated and we need to time box it. Similarly, we should treat like the discussions that happened in the design phase in a similar way, like create spikes and immediately change the label and change the assignee, because if the designer doesn't have a sole control over what's happening, they shouldn't be assigned and they shouldn't be like accountable for that delay. And as long as it's the question of understanding like what's the right weight, there's a learning that there's a never ending learning on that part. So it just goes on. But I think now I'm able to understand better, like how to, like it has improved over time. It is not as inaccurate as it used to be, but it's not perfect, yes.
That makes sense. Thank you. I think it makes a lot of sense. This new addition that you had to the handbook to change the DRI. Now it got me thinking that this is how we treat MRs when UX is doing a review on an MR. They're assigned as a reviewer, so we keep track of that. But we don't really do that when we are having the discussions with the engineers. So that's
I just found the
great.
link. I have put it there for you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nadia.
Pedro?
Yeah, thank you, Vithika. I'm very happy to see where you are today compared to our conversations that we had some months ago, and that you're in a better place, and very happy for you. And I completely understand the feeling of this is the closest I've been to, figuring this out, and I feel like I'm there. And that's how I feel every day at GitLab. But I always know that this is probably not going to last long, and we always have to keep adapting, right? But anyway, very happy for this presentation. The question I have is, what do you think are the advantages, and if you have time to talk about the disadvantages, but mostly what do you think are the advantages of using those planning tracking issues where you have tables with your issues and the weights and all of that, versus doing that in an issue board, for example?
So first of all, I think for an issue board, I need to have all the issues in the same project, right? And that was, again, a problem for me, because I wanted every different thing that's being worked on in different projects to be accounted for at one place. And I also make this, the planning issue itself, a part of the epic that Jackie is looking at. So everything is like in very close proximity, and yeah, that's mostly, I couldn't answer like what's the like showstopper reason that I'm using this over boards, but since I am looking at including everything that's like that's probably not even an issue, because sometimes, for example, right now I'm working on some CI permission audit work, and most of my work is happening over spreadsheets. But I do want to include them as well in the issue in my planning, because that's where most of my work is going, and it just gets easier to put everything at one place.
Yeah, so issue boards, you can create them at the group level as well, and you can create them at the level of the GitLab org group, and it will work for any project. What I've personally been more interested in is issue boards, because we can add the design weight labels, and you can create issues. Like, for example, you were talking about your onboarding experience that you will have to support. I would imagine that in my case, I would assign myself to that issue and try to have it visible in my board. But what I did like about your approach with the issue is that it's easier for you to add notes and maybe have a conversation just focused on UX, because usually those conversations about planning happen either in the issues themselves or in the group planning issue, which contains engineering and all of that. But it's not necessarily bad because we can have threads. But yeah, I'm thinking about the pros and cons.
So definitely something I can explore, but this last point you pointed, it's something I did not take into account, but that's definitely helping me, because I usually have conversations with Hannah and Jackie over those issues. If I take something out, or if I decide not to proceed with something, that's where I let them know.
Yeah. And I add a comment here. I think the try boards in the past, I think Dimitri was a strong user of boards for doing his planning and having issues. What I learned and what I also saw happening with Vitica, with her previous PM, is that something changed order in a board. So they stacked rank, right? And they prioritize by the order. And how do you tell the designer that the priority changed, right? You have a label, but you might forget to update the label. And what happens with Vitica and Jackie is that they communicate about when something enters her epic or enters her planning issue, and there's always a comment, there's always a history that you can follow, and you see the story, you see the receipt. Whether with the planning boards, yeah, anyone can change the order, and if they don't communicate that, it becomes a mess. And yeah, you're working on things that are not prioritized anymore. So that happened in the past.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also the ability to have a snapshot of what you did, that milestone, and also what you thought was the weight, so that you can then track it over time as you have been doing. Yeah, food for thought, at least for me. Thank you, Vitica, and thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Pedro.
Any other questions? All right. Now stop the recording. Thank you, Vitica.